The Iron Widow was dying, and we demanded humanity surrender, and I have to tell you that I knew, even as we sent the demand, that it was the act of a drowning crew pretending to stand on solid ground. I was aboard her. I was a junior officer on the most feared warship in the Vorrn Dominion, the legendary Iron Widow, the destroyer that had made more widows than any vessel in the history of our people. And I knew, as I helped transmit our demand for humanity's surrender, that our deadly ship was a coffin, that our reactor was failing, that our crew was hours from the cold and the dark, and that the surrender we demanded was the bluff of the dying, a last performance of strength by a ship that had none left. And then, hours later, the Iron Widow vanished. The galaxy still tells it as a mystery, the deadly Vorrn flagship that demanded humanity's surrender and then simply disappeared. I am the one who can tell you where she went, because I was aboard her when she vanished, and the vanishing was the strangest and most humbling thing that ever happened to a ship that had spent her whole life making other ships disappear. Let me tell you what the Iron Widow was, because you have to understand her terror to understand the mercy. She was a battle cruiser, the pride and the dread of the Vorrn Dominion, and her name was earned. The Iron Widow, because she made widows, because the ships she destroyed left behind grieving crews and grieving worlds, because across a long career of war she had ended more vessels and more lives than any ship our people had ever built. She was feared across the reach. The sight of her was enough to make lesser powers capitulate. The name alone was a weapon. I had served aboard her for 3 years, and I had been proud of her power, proud of her reputation, proud to stand on the deck of the ship that made the galaxy afraid. We were the Iron Widow. We did not lose. We did not retreat. We made widows, and the galaxy wept for the ships we destroyed, and we called the weeping our glory. And then we met the humans, and the meeting did not go the way 3 years of glory had taught me to expect. I will not tell you the whole of the engagement, because the engagement is not the point, and because some of it is hard for me to speak of even now. I will tell you only the shape of it, that the Iron Widow, the undefeated terror of the Dominion, met a human force in the deep black, and that the humans did not flee the way lesser powers fled, and did not capitulate the way the name alone usually made them capitulate, and that the engagement that followed was the first the Iron Widow had ever fought against an enemy who was her equal, or more than her equal. We had fought our whole career against the frightened and the lesser, and we had mistaken their fear for our invincibility. The humans were not frightened, and they were not lesser, and when the Iron Widow met them in the black, she learned, for the first time, what it was to be on the other side of the terror she had always dealt out. The Iron Widow was crippled. I want to be precise about this, because the galaxy's story leaves it out, makes the vanishing into a mystery when it was, at its root, the simple fact that our deadly ship had been beaten. The humans had not destroyed us. They could have, I understand now, but they had not. But they had crippled us, had broken our drives and breached our hull and damaged our reactor, and they had then done a thing that I did not understand at the time, a thing that no enemy of the Iron Widow had ever done, which was to stop, to disengage, to pull back and hold their fire, leaving the crippled Iron Widow drifting in the black, beaten but not destroyed, alive but dying, because the damage to our reactor was mortal and our ship was slowly failing around us, and there was nothing we could do to save her. We were dying. That was the truth aboard the Iron Widow in the hours after the engagement. Our reactor was failing. Our life support was going with it. The cold was coming into the ship, deck by deck, and the crew that had made so many widows was now facing the thing we had dealt out so many times, the slow death of a ship that cannot be saved, the coffin in the black. The humans had crippled us and withdrawn, and we were left to die slowly of our wounds. And the proud terror of the Vorrn Dominion was, in those hours, simply a tomb being filled with cold. And our captain demanded humanity's surrender. I have to explain this, because it is the thing that shames me most and that I most need you to understand, because it is the bluff at the center of everything. Our captain, a proud Vorrn of the old school, who had commanded the Iron Widow through her whole career of glory, who could not conceive of the Iron Widow as anything but the terror of the Reach, our captain could not accept that we were dying, could not accept that the Iron Widow had been beaten, could not accept the cold coming into the ship or the slow failure of our reactor, or the simple fact that we were a coffin now and not a weapon. And so he did the only thing his pride could do. He performed. He transmitted to the human force a demand for their surrender. The Iron Widow, crippled and dying, drifting helpless in the black, demanding that the humans who had beaten her surrender to her, because admitting the truth was more than his pride could bear. And so he bluffed, broadcast strength he did not have, demanded submission from a position of total helplessness, in the desperate hope that the name of the Iron Widow would do what the Iron Widow herself could no longer do, and frighten the humans into a capitulation that would let us pretend, in our final hours, that we had not been beaten. I helped transmit it. That is my shame. I stood at my post and I helped send the demand for surrender, knowing it was a lie, knowing we were dying, knowing the Iron Widow was a coffin pretending to be a weapon, and I sent it because my captain ordered it, and because some part of me, some proud Vorrn part, wanted it to be true, wanted the name of the Iron Widow to still mean something, wanted the humans to be frightened of us one last time before the cold took us. We demanded humanity surrender, from the deck of a dying ship, in the bluff of a drowning crew, and I waited at my post in the growing cold for the humans to laugh at us, or to ignore us, or to finish what they had started and destroy the crippled ship that had the audacity to demand their surrender while drifting helpless in the dark. The humans did not laugh. They did not ignore us. They did not destroy us. The humans answered our demand for their surrender with a transmission of their own, and the transmission was not what any of us aboard the dying Iron Widow expected, because it was not a refusal and not a counterthreat and not the contempt that our absurd bluff deserved. The human transmission said, I took it myself at my post in the cold. It said, Iron Widow, we can see your reactors failing. We can see your life support is going. You're not in any condition to be demanding anyone's surrender, and we think you know that. So we're going to ignore the surrender demand because it's obviously a bluff, and instead we're going to ask you the only question that matters right now. How many of your crew are still alive? And will you let us come and get them before your ship dies? We're not going to destroy you. We're coming to help. Please don't fire on us when we approach. We just want to get your people off before it's too late. We just want to get your people off before it's too late. I read that transmission in the cold of the dying Iron Widow, and I did not understand it. We had demanded their surrender. We were the ship that made widows, the terror that had ended more lives than any vessel in the Dominion, and we had just, in our pride and our helplessness, demanded that the people who beat us bow to us, and they had answered by offering to save us, to come into the dark, to the crippled terror that had threatened them, and pull our dying crew out of the cold before our ship became our coffin. The humans had looked at the Iron Widow's bluff, the absurd, proud, shameful bluff of a dying ship demanding surrender, and they had seen through it to the truth, that we were dying, that our crew was facing the cold, and they had answered not our bluff but our need, offering rescue to the very ship that had just demanded their submission. That is where this story begins. The Iron Widow was dying, and we demanded humanity surrender, and hours later our deadly ship had vanished, and the galaxy calls it a mystery, but it was not a mystery, it was a rescue. And I will tell you how it happened, the strangest hours of my life, when the humans we had threatened came into the dark to save the crew of the ship that made widows, and the deadly Iron Widow vanished from the line not because she was destroyed, but because she was saved. Pulled out of death by the very people her pride had demanded surrender from, in the hours when our bluff met their mercy and our terror met, for the first time in her long and bloody career, something stronger than fear. Our captain refused the rescue. I have to tell you that first, because it is the thing that nearly killed us all, and because it is the truest portrait of what pride does to a dying people. The humans had offered to save us, and our captain, standing on the bridge of his failing ship, in the cold that was creeping up from the lower decks with his crew dying around him, our captain transmitted back a refusal. He would not be rescued by the enemy. He would not let the Iron Widow, the terror of the Dominion, be saved by the humans who had beaten her. He would rather die. He would rather we all died, the whole crew, in the cold and the dark, than accept the unbearable shame of being rescued by the people his ship had spent her career making afraid. And he ordered our weapons, what was left of them, turned on the human ships as they approached, ordered us to fire on the rescue, because a Vorrn of the old school does not accept mercy from an enemy, does not survive at the price of his pride, would sooner make a coffin of his ship and a grave of his crew than admit the Iron Widow needed saving. I want you to sit with how insane that is, because it is the heart of what humanity overcame. We were dying. The humans were coming to save us, and our captain was going to make us fire on our own rescuers, was going to choose the deaths of his entire crew over the shame of being helped, because his pride could not survive the rescue even though his crew could not survive without it. The pride had become a thing that wanted us dead, that preferred our deaths to our humiliation, and it had a name and a rank, and it stood on our bridge and gave the order to fire on the only ships in the black that were trying to keep us alive. The crew did not fire. That is the first turn, and it did not come from heroism exactly but from something simpler and more human, if I can use that word for what my own people did. The crew did not fire because the crew was dying, and a dying crew in the cold, facing the end, discovers very quickly what its pride is actually worth, which is nothing, which is less than nothing, which is a thing you would trade in an instant for one more breath of warm air, for the chance to see your family again, for the simple animal continuation of being alive. The captain's pride was a luxury of a being who had not yet accepted he was dying. The crew had accepted it. We were in the cold. We had felt the ship failing around us. We had done the arithmetic of our reactor and our life support and known we had ours, and the knowledge had burned away our pride the way the cold was burning away our warmth, and left underneath it the simple desperate want to live. And so when the captain ordered us to fire on the human rescue ships, the crew, I among them, did not fire. We disobeyed. For the first time in the history of the Iron Widow, her crew refused an order because the order was to die for pride, and we did not want to die for pride. We wanted to live, and the humans were offering us life. And no reputation, no glory, no name however terrible was worth the cold death the captain's pride demanded. I was the one who answered the humans. I have to tell you this because it is my part in it, the thing I did that I am not ashamed of, the one thing in this whole story I can hold on to. When the captain ordered us to fire and the crew refused, there was a moment of terrible suspension on the bridge, the captain raging, the crew frozen in their disobedience, the human ships approaching, everything balanced on what would happen next, and I broke it. I went to my post and I opened the channel to the humans, and against my captain's screamed orders I transmitted the truth. This is the Iron Widow. Our captain has refused your rescue, but the crew has not. We are dying. I gave them the number. Souls still alive aboard, and we want to live. Please come. We will not fire on you. The crew will not fire on you. Come and get us. Please. And I gave them our docking codes, the codes that would let them come alongside and aboard, the codes that no enemy had ever been given in the history of the Iron Widow, transmitted by a junior officer over the screamed refusal of his captain, because the crew had chosen life over pride, and someone had to tell the rescuers that the choice had been made. The humans came. And I have to tell you what it was like, because it is the thing I will remember until I die. The sight of the human ships coming alongside the dying Iron Widow, not to destroy her, not to board her as conquerors, but to save her crew. They came carefully, gently, the way you approach a wounded thing that might still lash out. And they did not lash out at us for the absurdity of our surrender demand or the insanity of our captain's refusal. They simply came, and docked, and opened their ships to us, and began the work of pulling a dying Vorrn crew out of the cold and into the warmth of the ships that had beaten us. Human rescue teams came aboard the Iron Widow, the terror of the Dominion, the ship that made widows, and they moved through our failing decks looking for our wounded, our trapped, our dying, and they carried us out, Vorrn after Vorrn, into the light and the warmth, saving the crew of the ship that had spent her whole career making crews like ourselves into the dead. I watched a human medic, a young one, I think, though I am poor at reading human ages. I watched her work over a wounded Vorrn, one of our gunners, a male who had crewed the very weapons that made the Iron Widow a terror, and she worked over him with a focus and a care that did not know or did not care that he had been, hours before, one of the hands that made widows. She was not saving an enemy or a friend. She was saving a person, a hurt person, the way humans seem to save anyone hurt who came within their reach, and when the gunner, conscious, frightened, ashamed, tried to tell her what he was, what the Iron Widow was, what his guns had done, she said something I have never forgotten. She said, "I don't care what your ship did. I don't care what you did. Right now you're a person who's hurt, and I'm a person who can help, and that's the only thing that matters in this room. The rest we can sort out later. Let's just keep you alive first. Let's just keep you alive first." To a gunner of the Iron Widow, from the people the Iron Widow had spent her career widowing. That is where part 2 ends, with the captain's pride that would rather kill the crew than be rescued, the crew's choice of life over pride, and the humans coming into the dark to save the very ship that had demanded their surrender, treating the Widowmakers not as enemies but as hurt people who could still be kept alive. In part 3, I will tell you what became of the Iron Widow and her rescued crew, where the deadly ship vanished to, and what it meant, and what became of the captain and his pride, and the last thing I learned, the officer who gave the enemy our docking codes, about why the deepest strength is not the power to make widows but the power to refuse to, even of the crew that made widows of you, and why the Iron Widow's true vanishing was not the disappearance of a ship, but the disappearance of the thing she had always been. Dissolved at last in the warmth of a mercy her terror had never once imagined could exist. The Iron Widow vanished because the humans saved her. That is the answer to the mystery the galaxy has never solved, and I have to tell it carefully, because the vanishing was not one thing but two, the disappearance of a ship, and the disappearance of what the ship had been, and the second vanishing is the one that matters. The first vanishing was simple, and it was a kindness, though it did not look like one at first. When the humans had taken our crew off the dying Iron Widow, all of us, every Vorrn still alive aboard, carried out of the cold and into the warmth of the human ships, the Iron Widow was empty, a hull drifting in the black, her reactor still failing, hours from the final death that her crew had escaped. And the humans did not leave her there. They did not let the most feared warship in the Dominion drift as a derelict, a monument, a wreck for the galaxy to find. They took her, towed her, the crippled, empty Iron Widow, away from the place of the engagement, out of the black where the Dominion would look for her, and the deadly ship simply vanished from the line, gone from the place where she had demanded humanity's surrender, gone before the Dominion's other ships arrived to find her, so that when the Dominion came looking for their flagship they found nothing, no wreck, no debris, no Iron Widow at all, only the empty black where the terror of the Reach had been. That is why the galaxy calls it a mystery. The Dominion demanded an explanation. The Dominion searched, and the Dominion found nothing, because the humans had taken the Iron Widow away, crew and ship both, and left no trace, and a deadly warship that simply vanishes without wreckage or explanation becomes, very quickly, a legend, a mystery, a story the galaxy tells without knowing the answer. The answer was the humans. The Iron Widow vanished because the people she had threatened took her, not as a prize, not as a trophy, but as part of the rescue, because you do not leave even an empty ship to die if you can save it. And humanity, having saved the crew, saved the ship too, towed the dying Iron Widow out of the dark to wherever they took such things. and the terror of the Dominion passed out of the galaxy's sight in the hold of a human salvage operation, rescued down to her empty hull. But that is the small vanishing, and I promised you the large one, and the large one is the thing this story is really about. The Iron Widow vanished as a terror. That is the true disappearance, the one that mattered, the one I watched happen aboard the human ships in the days after our rescue. Because the crew of the Iron Widow, we Widowmakers, we proud servants of the ship that made the galaxy afraid, we were saved by the people we had threatened, and the saving did to us a thing that no defeat could have done. It unmade us. Not cruelly. The humans were never cruel to us, not once in all the time we were aboard their ships, but completely because you cannot remain the terror of the Reach after the people you terrorized have pulled you out of the cold and kept you alive and treated you, the Widowmaker, as a person worth saving. The pride that had defined us, the glory we had taken in the weeping of the ships we destroyed, the whole identity of the Iron Widow as the thing the galaxy feared, it could not survive the rescue. It vanished. Dissolved in the warmth of a mercy we had never imagined, a mercy that looked at the Widowmakers and saw only hurt people who could be kept alive, and in seeing us that way, made us unable to go on being the Widowmakers, because you cannot make widows of people once you have been saved by them, once you have seen them save you, once you have understood that the people you spent your career terrorizing were, all along, the kind of people who would pull your dying crew out of the cold, and not even ask what you had done before they kept you alive. I have to tell you about the captain, because his story is the sharpest version of the large vanishing. The captain who had ordered us to fire on our rescuers, who would have killed us all rather than be saved. The captain was saved too, carried off the dying ship by the humans whose rescue he had refused, kept alive against his own proud will. And I watched what the rescue did to him, the proud Vorrn of the old school, and it was the hardest thing to watch in all of it, because his pride had been his whole self, and the rescue dissolved it, and what was left underneath when the pride was gone was a being who had to reckon, for the first time, with what the Iron Widow had been. Because the pride had protected him from that reckoning. The glory had been a wall against the weeping, the terror a way of never having to feel what the widows felt. And the humans, by saving him, by refusing to let him die for his pride, had taken away the wall and left him standing in the wreckage of his own glory, finally able to feel the thing the Iron Widow had spent her whole career inflicting and never feeling, grief. The captain wept in the days after the rescue. The commander of the ship that made widows wept for the widows he had made, because the humans had saved him out of his pride and into the truth, and the truth was that the Iron Widow's glory had been a long catalogue of grief, and he had been the author of it, and now, saved, he had to know it. I spoke with one of the humans near the end of our time aboard their ships when the Iron Widow's crew was being arranged for return to the Dominion or for whatever each of us would choose, and some of us did not choose the Dominion after that, but that is another story. I asked the human the question I most needed answered. I asked, "Why did you save us? We were the Iron Widow. We made widows of your people. Perhaps somewhere in some engagement we may have made widows of humans. We demanded your surrender while we lay dying. You owed us nothing. You could have let us die in the cold or destroyed us, and the galaxy would have called it justice. Why did you save the ship that made widows? Why pull us out of the cold when we had spent our whole career putting crews like yours into it?" And the human gave me the answer that is the end of this story, the thing I have carried ever since. He said, "Because the widows you made are exactly why we couldn't leave you to die. You think we saved you in spite of what the Iron Widow was. We saved you because of it. We know what your ship did. We know how many crews died cold and afraid in the dark because of you. And that's exactly why we couldn't do it back. Every crew the Iron Widow killed was a reason not to become the Iron Widow. If we'd left you to die in the cold, we'd have just made more of what you made. More grief, more widows, more crews dying afraid in the dark, and we'd have become the thing we'd just beaten. The only way to actually defeat what the Iron Widow wasn't to destroy her. It was to refuse to be her. to look at the Widowmakers dying in the cold and pull them out anyway, because that's the opposite of what they did, and the opposite is the only real victory. We didn't save you to be kind, though I hope it was kind. We saved you to end the Iron Widow, not the ship, the thing the ship was. And the only way to end a Widowmaker is to refuse completely to make a widow of her, even when she's dying, even when she demanded your surrender, even when every reason in the universe says she's earned the cold. Especially then, that's when it counts. That's the only time it ever counts. That's the only time it ever counts. I have built the rest of my life on that sentence. The Iron Widow was dying, and we demanded humanity surrender, and hours later our deadly ship had vanished. And the galaxy calls it a mystery, but it was the opposite of a mystery. It was the clearest thing that ever happened, the moment a people who could have made one more widow chose instead to make none, and in the choosing, ended the terror of the Iron Widow more completely than any weapon ever could. They did not destroy our ship. They dissolved it, dissolved the thing it was, the terror and the pride and the long catalog of grief, in a mercy that pulled the Widowmakers out of the cold and refused, even of us even then, to make widows. The Iron Widow made widows her whole career, and called it glory. And she vanished at the end, not in fire but in warmth, saved by the people she threatened, unmade by a mercy she could not have imagined, dissolved into the simple human refusal to put even her dying crew into the cold she had put so many others. That is where the deadly ship went, not into wreckage, into rescue, into the warmth of the only force in the galaxy strong enough to look at the ship that made widows, dying in the dark, demanding surrender, and answer with the one thing that could truly end her. Not another widow, but a hand in the cold and the words I will never forget, spoken to the crew of the Iron Widow, by the people the Iron Widow had spent her whole life teaching the galaxy to fear. Let's just keep you alive first. We made widows, they refused to. And that refusal, not any weapon, is the thing that made the Iron Widow vanish, and the thing that saved not just our lives, but, in the end, whatever was left of our souls.